Hello, and thank you for joining us. Today, we are going to talk about the big news this week in the blockchain world, which is the largest NPM supply chain attack in history, with 18 packages and 2 billion weekly downloads affected. Uh, what does an NPM? So, NPM is essentially a library of data sets that people draw down when it's a packaging system. So when people are building wallets, they're building certain tools, they will draw down these libraries and use them to expedite the programmatic process. The problem is that they're not actually auditing what's there, and lots of bad actors know that. Um, there's going to be a little bit of potential paranoia here, you might say. We would argue absolutely not. We're giving you the thin end of the wedge. But on that base, passing over to Craig for the joys of what is NPM and why is it to be avoided and treated like a absolute syphilitic bomb.
So NPM is the nonsensical package manager for JavaScript and web stuff in general. um, the so there's a collection of situations have resulted in sort of the modern web as we know it, from a technical perspective, being created. Um, if you were going to look at like an engineering decision tree, like how do we get from where we are to having a thing that we want? If you just made at every single decision node in the engineering tree, if you just made the wrong decision, you would get the web at the end. And that's NPM is sort of the child of that context. So um, the primary language that's used everywhere on the web is JavaScript that was written in an incomplete specification, self-conflicted specification over a weekend and then passed off and then implemented when the guy came back. He's like, oh crap, now we're stuck with this. Um, and it hasn't
Hold
really
on,
gotten that much better.
slow down. Let's go back a second. So Node Packet Manager is what this is, the correct
Mm-hmm.
term that is used. Um,
I would argue my term is the correct one. Node is a JavaScript runtime.
so hold on. The reason I want you to go back is not to debate whether NPM means my version or your version. What I wanted to go back to was that story of the guy who decided he would just down his tools. Because actually,
Mm-hmm.
this, what Craig just said may sound incredulous to you, that surely not. Nobody can be that dumb. But actually, that did happen. This one person decided he didn't want to play nice anymore and took his toys out of the game. And it turned out that his toys were the game. Tell that
Right.
story a little bit more, because I think a
Well,
lot of people would be quite astounded at the truth of what happened there.
so like every developer knows this story, and to just kind of set it up. So like one outcome of every decision being wrong on the way to getting where we are. As Greg said, Node is the Node.js. Node is a JavaScript runtime that is taken out of the browser. So originally JavaScript was a scripting language that was intended to be embedded into pages so you get more reactivity and actually change what's supposed to be hyperlinked documents into sort of an interface that was programmatically controllable. And the problem this solved for everybody was back in the day, code distribution was incredibly difficult. So the way code distribution typically happened was on floppy disks, and you made a copy and gave your friend one, and it was sneaker net, right? And everybody ran around like sticking things into drives. And if you got the dirty drive that had something malicious on it, man, you were screwed, because there was a lot of auto run stuff back in the day, and it was a nightmare. Um, Fast forward, the web comes around and everybody gets internet access, and now you can see web pages and pictures and stuff, and pictures of things that some people want to see really bad, and they would pay money for this. And programmers started realizing, wait, if I can send text to somebody, then I can send code to somebody, and this kind of solves the code distribution problem in a very sloppy way, but it at least works. And this gave people tools that they could tinker with. So this is back in the original browser wars, with Internet Explorer being evil against Netscape that was trying to actually make a good browser for the first time. Netscape became Mozilla. The Mozilla Foundation is the origin of JavaScript and all this kind of interactive stuff, with giant companies trying to kind of like embrace, extend, and extinguish all along the way. So that's how we got the sort of story of like the jalopy mess, the gelatinous mass that is the web sort of came out of this big barfsville. That's why we don't have Flash anymore and so on. Anyway, in that context, what happened was a generational shift where everybody used to know like Pascal and C and assembler and so on when I was a kid. Now, the first programming tools that most kids ever come into contact with is they open developer tools in Firefox one day and they go, wow, I can like type stuff and it does things. That's a super lightweight entryway to programming. So the problem with this is that they wind up sort of like mentally crippling themselves by their first contact of programming winds up being JavaScript, and all the anti-patterns around that they just accept as normal. So that being said, a lot of people, a lot of new developers, new programmers have this problem of sort of identifying themselves with a single language or a single stack or tech stack or whatever, which is
tribalism, that they see themselves
it kind
as
of,
part
yeah,
of
it
this
becomes a
tribe.
tribal. It becomes a tribal identity, and it also becomes a problem of I think in JavaScript and it's uncomfortable for me to try to think in any other language. And that the ideal is that you break out of that as you get older and mature as a programmer, but some people just stay there forever. What this has driven though is a lot of people who only ever knew how to program in JavaScript had this big urge to, well, I want to use this one language everywhere because I already know it, and learning a new language is scary to me, so I'm going to stick with it. So eventually somebody came along, the Node project, and they made a JavaScript runtime that is not connected to a browser at all. It's just a JavaScript. It's like Python or something. It's just a runtime, like Erlang or Python or whatever. So that's where we get Node from. NPM, the Node package manager, that is a system online that has like a server side, and on the server there are bundles of source code, JavaScript source code. Now that could be a number of different languages, but they all have to wind up complying with the JavaScript runtime definition. These packages you can use as dependencies in your own code, and if you reference, like you're writing a program and you say, hey, Greg wrote a really cool colorization scheme. I want to write a little text game, and Greg wrote a cool colorization scheme, and I want to take it. I'm going to use that because I don't want to have to remember the color codes or know how that works. So I'm just going to use this package. So in my dependencies, I put Greg's package in, and NPM figures out what that means. And now what I don't realize is that Greg has used 10 other packages as dependencies to his package. And what NPM's job now becomes is go get Greg's colorization package and then open it up and peek in there and see, oh, well, Greg has 10 other dependencies. I need to go fetch those. Well, maybe they have 10 other dependencies and so on. So this is called automatic dependency resolution. And it is the root of not all evil, but quite a lot of evil. And what winds up happening is you think, oh, well, I don't want to use JavaScript itself. We've advanced past just JavaScript now to the point that nobody really writes JavaScript anymore. What they do is they write against a JavaScript framework. And so you're like, oh, I want to use Vue.js. Okay, so Hello World in Vue.js depends on Vue.js. Well, it turns out that Vue.js depends on about, I don't know, it's several thousand dependencies. So Hello World in Vue.js winds up spitting out about 70,000 lines of code to say Hello World. I'm not kidding, by the way. Just to do the build
and
for that.
a number of critical security warnings when you build it.
Yes. Yeah. So when you build it, you see the screen go like, it's like pulling in package, building this, unpacking that, blah, 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 and it goes through this whole thing. At the end, it's like 17,000 dependencies resolved, imported, 27,000 critical security flaws, 70,000 minor security problems or bugs or whatever. All these little type problems, like it's a pile of problems, and it's so many problems. I'm not kidding about the scale, by the way. It's tens of thousands in most frameworks.
And then it declares success. It's like,
yeah, and then it says success at the end.
And then you ask people, what is this? And they say, no, it always does that. You just go ahead.
Yeah. That's it. Nobody not an AI, not, you know, freaking the saint of the internet does not have time in a real world where you just want to show your thing to your friends, or you need to deploy a thing, or you've got investor pressure on pushing your project out right now, and you just now for the first time realized how bad this is, you're going to push your project out anyway, aren't you? So what happens is every time you get a build like that, like in the Erlang world, if we get a warning, we treat warnings as errors. That is not how the web works at all. Everything in the web is on fire constantly, just permanently on fire all the time. And you just go, well, it's always like that. Don't worry about it. Ship. And so people do. Now, I'm worried about getting my merman game to show up on the web because that's what I want to deploy. I don't care what the framework is doing. I don't care about anything. I don't care how the computer works. In fact, I don't even know which code is running on the server side and which code's running on the client side, because that's actually pretty opaque in a lot of frameworks today, which is insane, but that's how things are. So with that in mind, if just doing hello world is, you know, thousands of dependencies, and I'm never going to read any of them, and then writing a game is going to be tens of thousands of dependencies, I'm also never going to read those. And I'm not going to read their dependencies and so on all the way down to the bottom. What I'm left with is I actually have no idea what's running in my code ever. I just like, I think it works kind of. And so like, well, we'll just ship this. So that's the context in which, you see the little lock icon on your screen when you go to a website and you open your Electron app, and it's like, why does a text chat app take 2 gigabytes just to start up? Well, this is why. It's got all this junk going on that nobody understands. Now, in that context, there are a handful of packages that, like every framework and every big package in NPM, depends on somewhere at the bottom. One of these packages was called leftpad. And what leftpad did, this is the story Greg was referencing. There's a programmer who wrote a whole bunch of different little utilities, and each utility he wrapped up as a single package to try to keep size down. So like, maybe I want the leftpad function, but I don't want like a library with 30 other functions in it. I just want that one. So he was trying to be nice, and he's like, well, each function will just be a package, and then you can pick and choose what you want, and NPM will take care of it for you, so that'll be convenient. So he made this thing called leftpad, and what leftpad does, I wish I would. It sounds like I'm making this up, but what this package does is it's a formatting function. It's got a function in it. It's a formatting function. So I have like a word, like I want to say Gajumaru. I'm just going to type in Gajumaru. And what I want is I want to justify a line where the letters that I care about actually occur among other text by inserting spaces on the left side of it. So to like push it out or whatever. So it's roughly an alignment thing. So like I want 10 spaces before Gajumaru, and then like, you know, I want those inserted. So there's a function to do that. So you could calculate the number of spaces that you need, maybe given space, or you're using justified text or something. And because you're calculating that dynamically, you could just pass that as a number with some text that you want printed, and it will be aligned where you want. That's the whole package. That's all it does. Now, it turns out that like every framework in the universe depended on leftpad. And because the owner of leftpad is this one guy, he decided he had some dispute with like the NPM people, or I don't remember what the details are, but he basically decided, I'm taking my code back. I don't want it published on NPM anymore. So boop, he pulled it out of NPM. Like half the internet broke the next day. Like this sounds so stupid, but that's literally what happened, because nobody reads anything and nobody knows what happens. And every different company, like, as long as you're is what's a good, I'm trying to be polite. As long as your company is facing the same developmental challenges as every other company is facing, then you don't really care that everything is stupid all the time. The problem happens when one of these little stupid vulnerabilities pops out and hits everybody at once, then everyone freaks out about it. So Anyway, you would think that that would be a lesson, that there'd be a lesson here, like, oh, hey, maybe we should not be using piles of frameworks that nobody knows how they work, or stacks of code that have thousands of dependencies that nobody's ever going to read. Maybe we shouldn't do that. Maybe we should actually write some of our own code and reduce. Maybe we should aim to reduce the number of dependencies that we have and actually find out what our code is doing every now and then. You'd think that would be the lesson. That's not the lesson that they took. All they did was say, okay, so the new rule for NPM is that nobody can delete a package once it's published. That just became the new publishing rules. Instead of fixing the underlying insanity, they decided to go with this. That was the new rule. So fast forward a little further. There are, trying to not make this too technical, there's a special form of brain damage that a lot of programmers are susceptible to, and it's called object-oriented programming. And in this style, which JavaScript has embraced and frameworks have just taken and really run with, every time you create a new thing, or you're going to instantiate like a new little data object in your program, some code might be executing an addition that's opaque to you, that you don't see. And you have no idea what that code does. You just depend on that. Oh, this library is supposed to give me this object thing, and I can create a reference, which makes a new one of these, and I can call it and whatever. Now the problem is that those object models all have these thousands of dependencies behind them somewhere, and code's being executed somewhere. So what winds up happening is that I'm actually only writing like create new user Ulf. And then in the background, I don't actually know what's happening. Just all the stuff's going on. Well,
Magic.
Yeah, it's magic. So we used to jokingly call this it auto magically creates Ulf. Well, the auto magic has kind of become auto nightmare, and it gets back to this dependency issue. It's so you could go read everything in theory, but you'd have to pause the world for 5 years to catch up with whatever's going on, and it would change the next day. So in that context, what's happening is every different package. Remember the guy I just mentioned, right? Who said, I'm not going to take my package back because I'm the owner of it. Well, every different owner of every different package is literally the package owner, and they are in charge of updating it too. Now, that's normally all fine and good, because the open source world is like a bunch of kind of white hat players, and they share code with each other to try to advance everybody along together so that everyone can benefit from that body of work. However, the problem comes in when you have a developer that's got a package that everyone depends on, like leftpad, for example, and he took his computer to the repair shop, and a guy that works there found his GitHub key on it and pulled it. And maybe that GitHub key, or the sneaky motherboard you can't trust from China, for example, finds your keys and steals it. If you can crack into that guy's GitHub account, then you could make commits that look like they're from him and have his authentication assigned to it. And GitHub is doing some stuff to auto-magically package updates that he's tagged on his whatever his master branch is. And so that master branch may have code in the background on GitHub that automatically pushes the update to NPM without actually any intervention from him. This is a pretty common kind of publication style, is to have whatever your Git infrastructure is, or your CI infrastructure. When you do a tag commit that's to master, it may be actually pushing updates automatically all over to your users. One of those users might be NPM. And NPM in a lot of these projects might be auto updating dependencies in the background. So the problem with this is that, remember when I said, like, I say, hey, view some framework, create a new user, his name's Ulf, and blah, blah, blah. A lot of stuff's going on in the background that I don't know during the initialization phase of the user object. And it's completely opaque to me. I have no idea what's going on. It's just a maze of inheritance and conflicts going on. It's just a big giant soup of just nightmare stew all the time, and nobody's ever going to look in there. One of those dependencies might have been updated in the legitimate person's name, but the commit might be illegitimate by somebody who stole his key. And maybe the commit is a malicious blob of code that's going to execute every time I create a new guy, or every time you load a page, or maybe it's something that's going to stay resident in a plugin in your browser, check the contents of every page incoming from the internet, and then start changing stuff in that page. And so you're not actually seeing the real internet anymore. That's a thing you could do with, well, that this is an NPM. This is a basic security problem that exists with NPM. It's the source of about, in the JavaScript world, about 60% of attacks last year were NPM, what's called the supply chain attack problem, meaning the source code supply chain traces back to NPM, and you're getting malicious code injected into your projects from NPM without realizing it, because you've got tens of thousands of dependencies and nobody can audit it. Now, this brings us forward to the crypto problem, which is people don't write native applications.
2 billion wallets, allegedly. That's what is potentially affected by this.
Yeah.
And
well, we haven't spelled out what happened just yet. We've just had an attack that went out across the what would we call this? The MetaMaskiverse, the Ethereum world. It's pretty
look,
broad spread.
It's very broad. It's not just Ethereum.
Like, summarize what happened.
It's like anything that's using JavaScript anywhere in its system. To your point, Java is
JavaScript.
JavaScript, forgive me. JavaScript is to use a modern parlance, hot mess. But it's a hot mess that's very popular with lots of people. And so it's been injected all over the place. And as to your point, there are vast dependencies that sit in almost a network, like a Merkle tree of dependencies that go out from these things that come in when you do something, which is why, look, I remember when I started playing with computers, I was very lucky. My father bought me a bit of it was pocket money too that I'd saved up from washing cars. I bought an IBM compatible, as they were known, 286.
Dating ourselves hard.
Yeah, but that was what I started doing, playing with computers on, was that. And I remember the specifications. It had a 20 megabyte hard drive. Today, there's almost nothing on my phone that's 20 megabytes.
Yeah, I think pictures that big. It's crazy.
Yeah, but every
20 megabytes,
on my phone
not even the memory card in your digital camera.
Of megabytes, hundreds. And so what we're really telling here is a story of how, to some extent, how what was the expression? Moore's law about how computers will get twice as fast every 6 months or something like that.
It was specifically transistor density would double every so many months. We've run that out now.
But this played out in terms of memory and all these things. And it took away the discipline of writing really good code that was specific to the purpose, because to the point, that's hard. That's like sitting down saying, I'm going to write a book. Okay, you now need to think through the entire story that you want to convey, how you want to convey it, what happens to whom, when. You have to do the whole thing. I mean, writing a program isn't so different in some ways from writing a book. There are hundreds of different edge cases you need to think about, the storylines, etc. And there's something that you guys were fond of quoting when we first talked. Tony Hoare, there are two methods in software design. One is to make the program so simple there are obviously no errors, which is what you guys are fond of. The other is to make it so complicated there are no obvious errors. And that is the state of JavaScript. So it's not just...
It's the state of most things now. It's terrible.
It's not just MetaMask. MetaMask is sort of the daddy of this space. And to some extent, they are the Google of... just as Google is to search, so MetaMask is to Ethereum-based wallets. But this issue, I pointed this out on LinkedIn and Twitter yesterday. This issue has been begging to happen for a very long time. It's also not isolated. The thing about it that's interesting is how little was stolen because somebody twigged it at a point. For now, we don't really
by accident.
Yeah,
by
we don't
accident.
really, by accident, we don't really know just how far this will go. And the point I was making, and this is where we get into people saying, "Oh, you're being a conspiracy theorist."
It's
No, we're
begging to happen
not.
again too.
No, no, we're not. The idea that this, I mean, when I say Merkle tree, you it is almost inconceivable to the human mind how many branches and sub branches and twigs and leaves and if you want to think of it like a tree, it's the most densely packed tree you can ever imagine in your whole life.
It's like a
That's
fungal colony graph.
right.
It's just for
That's the
one program.
dependencies that compress into what you do when you talk about, was it 17,000 dependencies resolved? Oh, sorry,
Yeah,
26,000
yeah.
dependencies resolved, 17,000 critical security warnings
Critical
in order
error.
to write "Hello World,"
Mhm.
which when we, well, I'm in the middle of YouTube. So when we were kids, was actually you went into a little terminal and you began to write, and you had to follow certain syntax and rules, but you were the one writing everything. Um, anyway, the point is, we've gotten to a stage now where programs are massively complex to do relatively simple things, and nobody is actually verifying what all of those dependencies are, what all those code libraries are. So what's
Mhm.
happening is these things are being imported en masse. And to the point I was making to people, this is just the one who got caught. There
Mhm.
are likely, in the panoply of trees that are being pulled into this uh, system, I would bet you, I'd bet you my mortgage that every one of the major state intelligence agencies has got
Mm.
malicious code in there. It may not be malicious to take anything from you other than be able to intercept data, be able to set information. But this whole thing is absolutely seething with it. And it's not hard to do because somebody who writes really good code most of the time might just inject something that nobody else looks at because their reputation score is so high, i.e., they work for GCHQ. So they're a really, really good programmer and they're developing code that is everybody thinks is great. But there's one line in there that says, "Please identify me to Cheltenham." Um,
Then that's an accelerating problem on so many levels that when Peter Harpening and I had originally taken up sort of the, well, first we tried to write a marketplace and see how that works, and then we're like, well, this okay, so how do we talk to wallets? And then we reverse engineered how wallets like MetaMask and so on work, and we're just the programming environment is so insane inside the browser, um, that we wrote our own wallet from scratch that could run as a browser plugin. We wrote our own communication library to talk with it, and Peter's code was like it. So we didn't trust any dependencies, so we wrote everything from scratch to accomplish this, so that we understood what was happening, because we figured everything is so crazy that we can't trust. There's nothing we can trust. There's zero things that we can trust. So we're just going to write everything from scratch. We wrote all of our own crypto. We wrote all of our own serialization routines. We wrote all of our communication routines. We wrote all the in-page code to communicate with the wallet. We wrote it's a hand packaged project. Um, we did everything from scratch. And at the end of that, what we learned from the experience was that even with all this, we can't trust the browser, actually. So we came to the conclusion there is
sorry,
absolutely no safe way to do a browser wallet, no matter
explain
what.
why. Explain why, because that's also an interesting story. And look, one of the things that I want people to understand is not only did we build our wallet from scratch so that there are no dependencies, it is the only unhacked, or as I would rephrase it to people, I say it's the only non-pre-hacked wallet that you can get. Um, there's something phenomenal in there that changes the game from a security perspective completely, which is grids, which allows you to use essentially an air gapped optical process
Mhm.
to log into a website. which removes the whole thing of logins and passwords. And the reasons why the guys went to the great trouble of doing all of this was because of the issues that they found around web browser dependencies. So back to that one.
Yeah. So I guess to compress the story, there's a couple of different problems with the way that different elements in the browser communicate. It's very weird to me that, like, given how um, concurrent a multiple tab execution environment can be, that they never figured out a good model for concurrency. And it's weird being an airline programmer and then seeing like all these crazy ideas they've come up with to try to get around the concurrency problem. We decided to go with a model where we could try to make the asynchronous communication problem more tractable by kind of modeling the way that Erlang does things with messages and processes and so on. And we start realizing, wait, there's sort of universal, like, there's kind of a universal shout bus inside of the browser, and the addressing concepts are really crazy, and the kind of discovery you can do is kind of weird, and I'm not even addressing like the wacky 0-day problem that exists across browsers, because there's state actors that dump stuff into browsers to compromise those all the time. The bottom line is that without doing anything sneaky at all, I can make a plugin that will just like alter pages for you. And so, for example, you're on a shopping website and you're going to pay the vendor in like ETH or something, right? You want to pay with MetaMask. I can have like a fun little plugin from some unrelated thing it just happens to be in your browser. It may be checking all the contents of every page that gets shown to you and then changing them in some way. So you might think you're paying an address that you see on the page, and you see it right there, and you're going to pay to that. And you check in MetaMask, it says what it should say there, and you're like, yeah, I'm going to send this off. That page may have been altered before it got to you, and it doesn't matter if there's a little lock icon on it. Another plugin may have been altering it. And the author of that plugin might not know that plugin's doing it, because it may be one of the, well, it almost always is, one of these framework monsters that's got some malicious injection that the author doesn't know about. So a completely honest actor that you totally trust for good reasons, because he's actually a good guy, published a plugin that you like. It's convenient for you. Maybe it's one of these plugins, for example, that shows you how many background connections are going around the network. Every time you open a page, it shows a graph of like everybody who's spying on you on the web at the moment. Those are cool plugins, right? That plugin could be compromised by a supply chain attack. You don't know about it. The author doesn't know about it. And actually what the target is not even MetaMask. It's the page that would have an Ether account in it. And that account has been changed to the attacker's account. So you're paying the attacker, not the person you're trying to pay. That kind of stuff. Like, there's no way to get away from this stuff.
That was in fact this recent hack where the code injected itself, and it would rewrite the receiver account when you were trying to pay with MetaMask, for example. It would replace the receiver account with an account number that looked similar.
Right. Yeah,
So
yeah.
it
It had a whole
use,
bunch of prefixes trying to find one that looks close.
Yeah. So deliberately trying to make it difficult to, even if you looked at the account number, it would be difficult to see that it had actually been altered. Now, interestingly, when we said that it was discovered by accident, it was a brilliant malware, but it was a little bit stupid about assuming that the fetch function actually existed in the runtime system. And these guys were building their software with an older runtime version that didn't have the fetch function built in. So then it crashed, and they started looking into it. And they said that, for one thing, they found code, the malicious code, that was unreadable. But this is also a common thing in JavaScript, because you tend to, in order to increase or to get faster page load times, you minify the JavaScript so that it's unreadable, but it still works the same way. But so people are used to seeing essentially encrypted code being loaded into projects. That's not something weird. You're not supposed to read it. It's just
Yeah,
supposed to
gigabytes
execute,
of it.
but that also means you can't inspect it. So this is also one particular or curiosity about this particular programming environment that makes it even easier to hack. Because, for example, when we're in the Erlang programming world, no way in hell would we accept some encrypted Erlang program that is not readable. It just doesn't happen.
As far as like, so this spooked us, and this is like Peter and I, a year or two ago, getting spooked. And I remember like coming back and talking with you, Ulf, and Dimitar, and being like, this kind of sucks, but we just like, there's no good way to do this in the browser. Like the browser is such a horrible environment to be doing any of this. And I told him like the only way I can conceive of making anything kind of reasonable is making as stripped down a website as possible to be the marketplace, then not using any framework stuff, and telling users, hey, you should not be browsing this site from anything that's got plugins installed. If you've got, you've got your cool customized browser set up for doing other things, do this in a private tab that can't run. Like that's why private tabs can't have plugins enabled. You have to like specify that you want a plugin to run in private mode because they know about this problem. Everyone knows. That's the crazy thing, is all this is known. This was begging to happen because everybody already knows all these problems, and we just go with it.
Hold on, and this will lead into some other points around this and the vulnerability of Ethereum generally. But the point I was picking at yesterday, when I said, this has been coming for a very long time and has been happening nonstop anyway, was if crypto had any value for real. I mean, we're not talking about, an actual cryptocurrency like Bitcoin or Gaju, although Bitcoin arguably doesn't work as a currency because of its inability to be used in real world application. But we're not talking about something real. We're talking about all of these meme coins, all of these so-called NFTs, the gorilla things, and God knows what else. The stuff that basically makes up the crypto market. If it had real value, like actual money or actual assets, nobody would be doing this. There is no way in God's green earth that you would be able to pass one of those systems through the eye of a financial institution's checks and reviews for IT infrastructure. It's insane that anybody is really claiming that crypto has a value whilst using systems and key infrastructure that they know are completely, utterly, and totally compromised.
That's if you look at the.
Get my head around that. How can you say, on the one hand, this meme coin is worth $200 per coin, and there's 1 billion coins, and then at the same time be handling that on such completely, utterly, and totally inherently compromised infrastructure?
Well, that's one of the cases where like the crypto world being so fake that everything is not actually happening on chain, it's happening inside of exchanges and other places. That's actually kind of saved people because they don't usually have anything in their real wallet. It's all on Coinbase. And if you look at the way that, so out here where I live, any of the banks that you want to do commercial banking with online, what happens, the requirement for this is you have to install a browser that they roll out for you. So you might have, Chrome installed and Firefox installed. You're going to have their browser installed, and it's like their relicensing of a browser that already exists. And the reason they do this is to completely isolate it from everything else. There is no way to do plugins, and there's always a physical key card that you have to use to get the thing to work to sign into the bank. Now, for consumer banking, it's too much of a pain to like crack everybody who's only got $10 in their bank account and actually get anything out of that, right? If you're an attacker. But commercial banking, if you're doing any kind of commercial bank, if you're a business, your business bank accounts, you can't just get to them from your casual browser. They will give you a specific program to log into that with. And you see that a lot with like mobile financial management stuff for like stock trading, where they give you their app. They don't let you do it through a browser. And the reason is because they know how messed up this is. The fact that the crypto world, their approach to security, just like the software security part, you'll see all this stuff everywhere. Like, we've audited this chain, we've audited this code, we've audited this wallet or whatever. Our wallet's audited, and there's a little badge and all that stuff. And people see the badge, they're like, think it's good. None of that stuff's, from what I've seen so far, I have yet to see a wallet that's actually, other than ours, that's purpose written from scratch, native to the platform, and has access, because it's native, has access to all the security features of that platform, such as hardware key access and so on. What I see typically is people write a web browser plugin, because that's the expectation. People expect to have a web browser plugin like MetaMask as their wallet on their desktop, and then they take that same web framework trash and they wrap that up in a what's called a cross-platform build. And so the mobile wallet looks just like the wallet that you see in your browser. And the reason that it's that way is they've actually taken literally the same JavaScript nightmare and they just put it in your phone and they say, ta-da, finished. Now it works on iPhone and Android. The problem with that is that that's actually running in, like, it's expecting a web environment. It doesn't know about things like the Android hardware key store. So your mnemonic phrase that it can show to you is stored in there, hopefully encrypted in some way, but it's not using like the biometric security features of the phone to secure access to hardware keys that are generated in that phone and can never be extracted from it, to encrypt and protect your private data, like that mnemonic phrase that gives rise to your Ethereum keys and so on. We do our key generation a little bit differently than Ethereum, but the basic principle still applies. And that's why I have to write, like we've done our desktop wallet, that's all from scratch. There's no dependencies. And the package manager actually that we use for that, I wrote that too, with 0 dependencies. It actually bootstraps and runs itself. We know every single detail of how everything works, and all of our dependencies are written by us. That's a pain. That's a lot of freaking work to do.
Or by Ericsson.
Yeah, right. So Erlang is the runtime that we have. That's the external. If we're going to point to a dependency, we have one root dependency, and that's Erlang, the runtime itself. That's it. Oh, well, your operating system. I mean, okay, I'm not going to talk about trusting Windows and Microsoft and Apple and all that, but the bottom line is you have to have a thing that runs at all somewhere, and you have to draw a line. And the point I was making a couple years ago when I was like, this sucks, but we're going to have to do everything from scratch, or I can't, because I'm the one that was trying to stand up a marketplace in the first place. That's how I even got into crypto. Was I like, hey, no one's done Amazon in crypto world, so I should do that. And it turned out that crypto sucks, and that's why no one had done it yet. But that was a discovery process. And this was one more element of crypto sucking that I was oblivious to until I really dug in. And then I realized, hey, we have to do our own wallets from scratch. But part of that
and we actually had to
where
also answer the question, why not just use MetaMask? Because
yes.
MetaMask is a wallet that is actually designed to handle different kinds of crypto.
So
that's right.
Let's set the scene for this a little bit. I've said before that it is extraordinarily hard to make an argument for why somebody should invest another million into something that you spent millions developing, which you're going to give to the world completely, utterly, and totally for free. This is a little bit like offering garlic, a cross, and a cross-shaped dagger to a vampire. That's that's the realms of absolutely not. That's insane. Our argument essentially is we don't own or control the chain, but we do know how to deploy expertise on that chain in a commercial way. Like, for example, Gajumarket, GajuPay, all the platforms and applications that we want to offer to the world now that we have an actual blockchain that actually works, minting real money that really works. So context is, budget is really thin. We need to get to market as quickly as we can in lots of different ways and be able to alleviate some of that pressure. And yet we chose to take very lengthy detours into doing some of these core things really, really well. That's how important this is, people.
And every time I mention something and I'm like, oh man, we're going to have to do this from like square one or we can't trust it. Everybody's very stoic about it, but I can feel the, oh shit, every now and then. We get the point now where we're like about to we're pushing product already, so thank goodness. But it's so important though that nobody questions the judgment determination. We're making a value judgment on that, and nobody questions why. It's just we're like, oh man, it's like when you have a tree stump in your yard and you realize like actually you're just gonna have to get a pickaxe out and like dig through all the roots, and you're like,
yeah,
okay,
look,
and yet
that's a lot of work.
We still do automatic upgrades on our client software. So
yes, we do.
It's not like
we solved the code
lost
distribution problem.
functionality. We just do it in a controlled way.
So, look, I want to ram this home for people because on a very, very limited budget with a small, high trust team, and I'm the non-coder on the team. The other guys, there's a small number of people doing all the code, all the thinking through how that's going to be deployed and done. We chose to do these things from scratch because they are that important. I can't emphasize this enough. If we, as we were when we started this, came to the conclusion that there was no way to leverage the existing platforms and infrastructure in the crypto world, and we would have to build everything from scratch, that was an absolutely colossal financial problem to solve. How do we get from here to there with nobody really willing to fund an actual blockchain that actually works, minting real money that really works, because that means you don't own it or control it. And we'll have another conversation about DEXs next week. But one of the things I want to pull out of that is that all of the decentralization that you see in DEXs is actually theatrical. It's just there for show. It's not real. Why isn't it real? Because they're conflating the governance and the mint function, and this is where the whole tokenomics thing comes from, which is a complete farce and abrogation, and in fact an insult to the use the
use of syllables.
Well,
it's a horrible word.
It's awful. I was going to say an insult to its origin, which is economics, but yes, it's actually an insult to the language it's constructed in.
It's an insult to like Greek and Latin at once. It's amazing how bad it is.
But people really need to get this, because why would we take such massive risks with the runway that we had and force ourselves to find more funding to extend that runway with a gun to our head the whole time?
Yeah.
Answer, it's that important, because if, as we intended at the outset, you're creating an actual blockchain that actually works, minting real money that really works. And I keep saying it because I want people to get that into their heads. Each one of those qualifying statements is true of the Gajumaru. That means you're making real money. That means we have to stop playing with absolutely insanely untrustworthy, broken, hacked to infinity, to paraphrase Pixar, to infinity and beyond systems.
Oh no, copyright strike.
But we had to do this because, and you, the audience, people out there, anybody who's thinking about any of these things, this is what you need to start demanding. Because if you're going to talk about crypto having value, you cannot say that and at the same time be completely okay with this lunatic asylum of insecurities. Our approach,
It's
Gajus are real money, therefore we built really high enterprise grade proper coding from scratch to give you the necessary tooling, infrastructure, and platforms to be able to use this securely.
we've just like
And
there's a
I think we can also say that obviously you shouldn't just trust us when we say that our code is secure and theirs isn't. But
right.
one of the ways we are trying hard to develop our software is to make it actually auditable. And I think we
Yeah.
can give a few sort of quick pointers here for non-technical people. I mean, one thing we're saying, if someone is offering to keep your money in a browser plugin, just say no way in hell.
Mhm.
It cannot be made safe.
That's like the
That's what we're
pedophile
saying.
at the school
Yeah.
gate. If they offer you sweets, just say no, right? It's the same
And
thing.
and another thing we're saying is that if they are actually using NPM and JavaScript for their software, arguably it cannot be made safe.
Mhm.
It's going to be such a gargantuan task that the best assumption is it's not going to be made safe. Actually, MetaMask spent a lot of effort trying to make their wallet safe despite this. And
Mhm.
I guess we have proof that they failed. And this is also something that Craig was talking about a year ago or over a year ago,
The lava
looking into
moat.
MetaMask. The
Oh yeah,
LavaMote.
we thought it
Yeah.
was a practical joke actually. Like just to set this up, like the reason that we didn't go with anything that existed already was because by the end of our, again, when I say exploration, we wrote a whole wallet marketplace project, the communication libraries, the interlink, everything from all the serialization libraries, everything from scratch to make sure that we knew what was going on and it was auditable. And just to give you a comparison, remember Hello World in Vue.js is like 75,000 lines. The entirety, I just did a word count on Gajudesk. Gajudesk is 5,278 lines right now. That's a totally readable project. Like you can actually go in and read that. And I've tried to make it as readable as possible. So my point is,
And Gajudesk actually also is a development environment, allows you to load contract code and edit it. And
yeah, that's been a really fun thing to work on whenever I've been able to focus on it because it's got some really like there's killer features. Anyway, I don't want to get into that, but yeah, that's a fun
So
fun thing for developers. But
which one of you has got lava moat screen grabs?
I've got it open. So when Peter and I were uh, plumbing the depths of MetaMask, we were kind of keying into this like, hey, it looks like NPM is a massive security vulnerability. I wonder if that's an issue. And we look into it, and turns out it's a huge problem. It's just not that publicized until something like what happened the other day, like with this particular crack happens. Until something bad happens, you never hear about it. But anyway, we identified that as a critical security vulnerability, and we're like, how does MetaMask deal with this? What are they like? They have to be doing something because it's like there's no way that these guys wrote a browser plugin that's a wallet and they didn't think about like malicious code coming from NPM. And it turns out that they did think about it. And let me share here real quick. I am not the blah blah. Hang on.
yeah, writing a crypto wallet is easy. Screen sharing, different
Screen
kind of
yeah. No, well, I'm trying to not do. I don't want to do the infinite tunnel thing. And if I share my whole screen, which is normally what I do when we're talking together, I'm on a huge one right now, and everything will be so tiny nobody can read anything. So I'm trying to make.
It's okay to fail, Craig.
That yeah, no kidding. That didn't do what I wanted because it had an old view of my. Oh, it said that it couldn't share because of it was trying to protect me from myself. Thank you. Okay, so here we go. Is this showing?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Yay. So we were asking ourselves, what is it that MetaMask did to try to protect themselves from this particular problem? And it turns out they did think about this, and they spent a tremendous amount of effort, and there was this whole thing called LavaMote. And what LavaMote is a a JavaScript code permissioning environment written in JavaScript. So it's sort of a JavaScript like loading runtime inside of JavaScript, which is quite complicated. And there's a lot of different modes to this, and the way that it works is a little complicated. And there's lots of different pieces to LavaMote. And we thought this idea was so silly that we actually thought this was an elaborate joke at first. And it took us a couple days to realize, like, no, they're totally serious. Like they looked at the situation, they go, wow, there's too much code coming in, it's too complicated. Our immediate reaction to that is, well, how do we reduce that down to no dependencies? Their reaction was, oh, that's complicated and that's why it's scary. Well, let's make it 10 times more complicated. That'll totally solve the problem. So I really thought this was a joke, actually, not kidding. So their whole I don't know, sometimes I kind of hate everything. This is the state of the world that we're in, though. So they're trying to secure JavaScript in JavaScript. Something I'm curious about is LavaMote has dependencies itself. That's interesting.
Yeah, so clearly they were not able to protect against the recent hack.
Long story short, it's fun to kind of geek out on the details of this. I am curious about this. Okay, thank goodness. I'm curious about the dig into the details of LavaMote, but the fact that LavaMote was their reaction. Instead of saying, let's find a better way, let's find a way to not have, like, we know people are going to go shopping through browsers. They're going to go through websites, and they're going to they want to go to Amazon. They might want to pay at Amazon with Ethereum or something. If they were going to do that, because that was the idea with cryptocurrency, that's the currency part of cryptocurrency, supposed to be. They're going to do that through a browser. So the first thing you do is, okay, how do I make the key management, how do I make the wallet system separate, be at least in a separate process than the browser? That's the first thing you do. Not these guys. They're like, we're committed to only ever making a browser plugin as the wallet, and it's a hellscape and it's impossible to secure. So what do? We make the situation even more complicated. And this is what they came up with, is LavaMote. And anyway, long story short, it didn't save them from this, and there's a bunch of other attacks it won't save them from. And when it comes to browser plugins are always going to be able to mess with in some way, kind of mess with shopping sites, and then there's been a lot of e-commerce sites that actually have been attacked with supply chain attacks through NPM, and it requires a fair amount of work to make sure that you're secure against those. As a user, though, all of that entire drama is kind of hidden from you, and anyway. So long story short, you cannot have a browser wallet. It's bad.
Yeah, in a sense, it's an example of a candlestick problem. If you're familiar with a candlestick problem, it was there's this great TED talk by Dan Pink many years ago when he humoristically talked about the candlestick problem and how it's a way to illustrate your ability to solve out-of-the-box problems. And So the challenge is you have a candle and you get some tacks in a box, and you're supposed to get the candle to stick to the wall. And you can't use the tacks and just push them through the candle. It doesn't work. You can try to melt the candle and glue it to the wall. Doesn't work. The thing that does work is to realize that the box that the tacks came in can be used as a shelf. So you can tack that to the wall, and then you can put the candle in the box. Problem solved. The interesting thing there was that it was demonstrated, it has been very clearly demonstrated, that if you put time and reward pressure on people, essentially the higher the rewards, the more tunnel vision they get, and the less likely they are to realize that they can actually use the box too, and not just the tacks that the box that are in the box. And so when you time people, you give them performance rewards, they get really worse at this type of problem. So if someone pays you a lot of money to solve the security problem in your NPM environment, it is logical from this point of view to try to build a moat in NPM, in JavaScript, to try to fix it where you stand. And the out-of-the-box problem is to try to take a step back and think, can we provide easy authentication some other way that people are actually going to like, and that is going to be efficient and obviously secure? And so we've talked about how there are a few countries where such authentication solutions have actually become ubiquitous. So I happen to live in Sweden, and in Sweden, and so I think Sweden, the Scandinavian countries essentially have something like this. I think Norway has its own. The Swedish version, Bank ID, can be used if it's in Sweden and Finland, or Sweden and Norway, whatever. It was actually one thing that we looked at when we developed the grids solution. I could actually show. Let me. So now I'm.
Yeah,
This is actually the fraud report page that shows how that tracks fraud on DeFi. And it's kind of interesting, like just showing that it's still going on, and it's hundreds of millions and sometimes even billions of dollars worth of crypto being lost through scams and hacks, and not always recovered. And of course, one problem is if you go to the police, they will just stare at you blankly, and they will not necessarily help. So,
well, good news. Those dogs are going to be worthless soon.
I found a little instruction video on how people typically log into a website that supports Bank ID. So essentially, it shows a QR code. You bring up your phone, the Bank ID app, you click the scan QR code, and then you type in a PIN, or you press your thumb to the fingerprint scanner, and you're in. And the interesting thing is that everybody under 70 knows how to do this in Sweden and does it daily, all the time. So it's become a ubiquitous pattern, and it's extremely fast. This is typically how you log into your bank. It's how you can pay from your phone. There are a lot of, especially government websites, that allow you to log in with Bank ID. One thing I found when it's a trust-based system. So essentially, your bank, who knows who you are, can issue a traditional certificate that is then installed on your phone in the Bank ID app. And I found when we were helping some Ukrainian refugees that if you're here as a refugee, you cannot get a bank ID. You actually have to get a residency permit before you can get a bank ID, because you have to have a real personal ID. So, I mean, one of the things we are offering with grids is essentially the same use pattern, same ease of use, but it's decentralized. It's trustless.
Mhm. And it lets you
Which
log
is
in. You can
very
sign.
new.
Yeah, you can. Those QR codes can initiate spends. They can. We can do contract calls that way. Any kind of signature thing that needs to happen, we can do through grids, which works just like that video works. And thankfully, the Gajumaru is really fast. So shopping with it is like it's a snap. It's actually really cool. But getting to the point, it would have been so much easier to just cheat and use a bunch of JS framework trash that already exists, and then just like ignore the security problem. But and I mean, there's clearly a big temptation there, but that temptation doesn't really touch us because we view that as such a huge fail that if I put a marketplace up and people try to use it and then their wallet gets cracked because it's just browser trash, it's all NPM garbage, and it's completely vulnerable to this, that would wind up damaging the whole project. And it's just immoral. Like, I can't tell users, it would be literally immoral for us to tell users, hey, trust us with your money, use the apps that we're giving you, trust that those aren't going to screw you over, while we know full well that there's just a whole universe of compromises waiting to happen to people that are not like hypothetical. There's, I mean, the LavaMote page that I was looking at the bottom just a second ago, there's articles from 2018 in there that explain in detail exactly how to do these attacks. So it's not like it's not a known issue. We cannot proceed knowing how compromised everything is and just go with the flow. So it was a moral imperative to, actually do it from scratch so that I can tell you, I know exactly when you push this button, I know what message goes where in the program. I know what code is called because I wrote the whole thing. I know all of it. It calls some libraries that like Hans and Ulf wrote. But I know where everything is. I know where I know what the package manager is calling in detail because I wrote every single line of the package manager that we use. So like, that's a really important thing to be able to say. If there is a compromise, it's not something that we knew about and covered up. It's something that we have to seize on and fix right away. And we actually can fix it because it's a tractable problem because we wrote all the code in the first place. So identifying what went wrong is like that easy because we all know it. It's all in our heads already. And it's open for review too. Like our code it's not 70,000 lines of stuff. It's a couple thousand, which is like a modest size. It's not even a big project. So it's a tractable problem to go through and read it and see how things work. Thank goodness.
Yeah, back to the days
Well, the
when people used
blockchain
to have
itself
to.
is slightly more, but
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
well, the blockchain itself is that's a bear.
yeah,
That's a complicated guy.
but the blockchain itself is a whole different animal. We're talking about
Mm-hmm.
a tool for using
Yeah, the wallets. Yeah.
and a fundamental tool. So to summarize that part, I would just say this: if you really believe that the assets in your crypto wallet are money, then you better get over to the Gajumaru as soon as humanly possible and start using our wallet. Because the Gaju is money. We built this to be an enterprise grade solution set with no dependencies, everything coded, everything done from scratch so that we know that it works and we know it doesn't have these issues. In terms of institutional adoption of blockchain and the utilization of digital assets, unless you are insane or you have managed to convince the board of your bank that you are not insane whilst being clearly insane and unaware or willfully ignorant of all of these enormous security vulnerabilities, then you too should cancel anything you're doing on Ethereum, Solana, any of these things, and come and join us on the Gajumaru. Now, there's another reason why you should join us in the Gajumaru, and actually it goes back to something that Yanni Maroslav identified back in the days when Ethereum was first coming about, which was that it was gloriously insecure in of itself, because Solidity is a terrible smart contract language, and Ethereum virtual machines are not secure. He therefore raised a great deal of money to build an alternative. And the aspect that we borrowed from the Eternity project under the MIT licensing that he built the whole thing on was Sophia, a smart contract language, and
ISC license.
ISC license, forgive me.
Very similar to MIT.
And what that
I take
what
exception to the he built, having
forget
been one of the original members of the
Because it
core
wrote
team.
like half the
Sorry.
stuff.
So he raised the money to get global experts to build what was a truly secure virtual machine for operating on chain with a proper smart contract language. When I say to people that Ethereum is dangerous to use and that the Ethereum virtual machine is insecure and the smart contract language is very immature and easy to game, they usually think I'm talking out of my hat. But Ulf, you made the point in our morning stand-up that Ethereum continues to be hacked on a daily basis. It's just such a regular occurrence that it doesn't make the news anymore. So Ulf, over to you.
Oh, well, so yeah, I did show that that DeFi scam tracker, which, you know, essentially you scroll
Those
down
are
and
so
this
big,
is,
man. I forgot.
yeah, it's like the numbers are just staggering. And an interesting thing about being ripped off on blockchains is if you go to the police, which would make sense, right? Because if these are dollar numbers, the theft wasn't actually in dollars, it was in ETH or whatever, but they are not legally recognized as currency. So the cops may look at you funny if you want to report a theft of some crypto, because they will rightfully wonder
billion.
what the jurisdiction is and also what the crime is, because essentially you agreed to play around in an unregulated space with a bunch of complex logic that you freely decided to make use of. And then it turns out that the smart contract that may have been through like 3 security audits, this is not unusual, still had exploits in it. And those were exploited. And it's a little bit like when Javier Milei was confronted because the Milei meme coin turned out to be a rug pull, and he wasn't directly involved. He had put up one X post saying that this project might be interesting, and then he pulled it down after an hour or so when he realized that it wasn't really serious, or it was a serious rug pull. And when asked for a comment, he basically say, okay, so you go to the casino, you lose money. How strange is that? And that is something of the what you get if you try to call the police on some hack or blockchain attack or exploit that was used against you, probably in a different country from what you're in, on a blockchain that's outside of regulation. It's just unenforceable. And this is another thing that we've been talking about, that if you want security and you want it to be commercial grade, the regulations you have to adapt to regulation in a way that's enforceable. If it's not enforceable, you're not going to pass audits. The best you can hope for is to basically get the authorities to say, what you're doing is outside of regulation. But if they're saying that, you're going to have a hard time asking retail business to come and play on your blockchain.
It's also
because
worth
they're going to invest
remembering
real
that
money and
well, it's worth
yes.
remembering that the phrase or the term international law is an oxymoron, and people forget that all the time. They appeal to international law. Well, there's no world police. I mean, some people wish there was one. That's that gets into a deep conversation real fast. But
Yes, Mussolini, Stalin, Hitler. I could go on.
Occasionally,
right the way
you will
through.
hear from the U.S., why don't we just accept that we are the world police? And everybody outside the U.S. goes, no!
Right. Yeah,
but,
you know.
Or yay, depending on which camp you're in.
The point both guys are making is worth accentuating, which is that if it were the case that you were acting in a truly decentralized context, which arguably is not the case in the existing so-called blockchain firmament, because what passes for blockchain at the moment tends to be, Bitcoin aside, which is an actual blockchain, what tends to pass for being a blockchain is not, in fact, what we would phrase to be a blockchain. Because the test for a blockchain is, can I trust the message, not the messenger, securely at scale? Yes or no? If yes, it's a blockchain. If no, it's not. Anything that is anonymous proof of stake is to some extent gameable and controllable by colluding actors in the background. So you can't actually trust the message in the same way that you would on the Gajumaru or indeed on Bitcoin. In a truly decentralized context, you are acting in almost like you're acting in space. You are not acting within any controlled human environment. That's the whole point. So that's why you can trust the message, not the messenger, security at scale. So again, this comes back to, if you're going to build something real, that the what we talk about in terms of grids, all these things, they're all taking us toward what we call an internet of economics. So instead of going to the web as you do today and going onto a website and saying, yeah, I'd like to buy that jacket, and you do the transaction, you set up an account, you give them your Visa card details. In the context of the world that we want to establish, you will browse for what you want on the internet. It will be the internet of data, and that's all it will ever be. But you will actually transact in an internet of economics. To make that happen, we had to do things in a completely different way from everyone else and make it secure, make it so that these things worked. One of the things
all
that
the
we
way
actually
down
wanted to have happen is to make it so that you can read smart contracts. You don't just have to accept that they say that it does X. You can actually read them and check for yourself. These are all things that we've built into the process with the Gajumaru to make sure that it can fulfill the brief, which is to establish the Internet of Economics, to create a global economic resource layer, which we really have not had since the days that we were hunter-gatherers and we negotiated the spaces between us through violence. What the guys are talking about with Ethereum isn't limited to Ethereum. Ethereum is merely the biggest and baddest of these. If you look at the projects around Solana, if you start diving into some of their developer chats, you will find libraries upon libraries of dependencies all over again. This time, instead of it being in JavaScript, they're coming out of Rust. And there's a whole
which is JavaScript adjacent, by the way.
Right, but there's a whole slew of things that are being hidden from you, but which you should be aware of, because it's a bit like when someone said the other day, they came on to the Gaussian mining Telegram group and they said, is it okay for my computer to turn off every now and then? And I said, yeah, sure. But bear in mind, if you had a hose pipe that shot out $100 bills in your garden, would you turn it off? No. Well, then why would you turn off your computer? Because that's the step change in thinking that needs to be gotten to, which is when we start talking about real money, that is really in your wallet, and it really is your wallet. All of these things, it's in your accounts, in your wallet. All of these things are step changes from where we've been, and they take us into an evolutionary step away from where we have been in the past, which has been about digitization, making the inefficient marginally incrementally more efficient, into a step of digitalization, which is to remove those inefficiencies altogether. So in this context, we talked about you buying a jacket online. You will actually transact with grids with the counterparty for that sale, and everything will be negotiated through the Internet of Economics, not the Internet of Data. You won't be making your sensitive, hackable financial information and address available in this context. With that, I think probably close out the session. The key thing we want people to take away from this is start asking questions. If you think that you have that crypto has value, ask why you're using wallets that are insecure. Why don't you care about these things? Because you should demand better from the people who are providing the tools for you to operate with.
I'd like to
And
make
I think, yeah.
I've been asked multiple times, once by you, and I walked you through kind of why we had to do this from scratch, and you're like, okay, well, that sucks, but have at it. That sucks because it's going to take time, and that's the money pinch that you mentioned earlier. But we've been asked as a team a couple times by other parties for an opinion on this or that library to base a wallet on, or they want to do a wallet project, or what wallet should they target for adoption, or and so on. And so far, everything I've reviewed has this exact problem to it. And every single time that I mention that to people, and I come back with this answer that, well, it sucks, but I mean, that looks like a cool library from the perspective of somebody that would just use it and make a thing and, you know, just have it run. But in the secure context of making a wallet that not you, but other people are going to use, and you're promising them that this is a secure thing, my recommendation is to not go with that and write your own thing in-house, because that library's got, you know, and I was explain all the problems that lead up to the attack that we just saw. I explained in detail to a couple of folks that asked our opinion on this exact issue about a year ago. And their reaction is not just that they're nonplussed or that they're astonished at how bad things are. Their reaction is, it's the same thing as when I was doing security assessments and strategic assessments, 10 years ago. You tell people something that they don't want to hear, especially that they don't expect to hear. They expect just to get a green light and a thumbs up. Then you give them an in-depth explanation of why what they're doing is dumb and dangerous. And they just kind of blow it off and go on with it anyway. I don't understand that attitude. It doesn't make any sense to me. I don't know what pressures they're feeling pinched by. We've got exactly the money pressure that should motivate us to cheat, and we just can't do it because you just can't. It's not going to hurt me if this goes wrong. It's going to hurt like all kinds of people and then screw this whole industry up more than it already is. That's like, no, I'm not going to do that. I don't understand how these people can just like flippantly blow these deep security issues off and just move on. I don't get it. I don't know what's wrong with these people. Like, that's kind of been, I don't know, Ulf and I've talked about this a lot in the past already. It's kind of like, I don't know what's wrong with these people. And that's all over crypto in general. But that absolute flagrant disregard for user security just blows my mind. I don't get it.
And I think that one piece of advice, perhaps, to non-technical people when they're trying to look at different offerings in this space is to look at how they communicate. I mean, one of the things is that maybe we get lost in the weeds in some of the technical details sometimes, but I think we are pretty consistent in always wanting to convince you how, not just that our systems are safe, our solutions are solid, and that at the end of the day, you will be able to trust it with your money, with your business. We are also ready to explain how. and we will keep working at explaining how until we are able to convince people that it is not just safe, it is provably safe, or it is obviously safe. And like Greg said, Tony Horse, there are two ways of conducting a software design. One is to make it so simple that there are obviously no deficiencies. He also said that method is the harder one, because then you really have to get down to the core substance of it all and understand how things fit together. So
that is hard, but it's so much more rewarding too, though, even just as a programmer, being able to actually know what happens through every phase of the system.
But if people are communicating, or companies are communicating in a trust me bro way, is like, you're too stupid to understand, so just leave it to us. You wouldn't give someone like that the keys to your house. And
that's actually a really important point. If you look at a lot of the projects out there, the people who are involved in doing it are anonymous. It's very hard to ascertain who they are.
That just dawned on me the other day when we were talking about that and getting into like the hyperliquid stuff and going like, actually, nobody should, like, we do these videos showing our face and I'm like, we're actually like really weird.
Every time you talk, your name pops up. The company that you work for pops up. Your face is there. If someone, the point is, we are not in any way, shape, or form hiding from anybody what we're doing and why we're doing it. And when you look at so many of the projects out there, they don't identify who they are. And I've never come across a world in which we can just trust this. And, with this hack, there were all these posts going out on LinkedIn from people who are service providers in this industry, financial service providers in this industry, exchanges, etc., talking about how touched they were at how the community backed them up and how the community said that it was all okay and it was all, let's all be friends, isn't it wonderful? We're on this frontier together and we're getting attacked and we're going to come together as a community. I'm sorry that this is the insanity that I'm watching on social media. So you guys don't get tainted with this because you don't have any connections in the crypto world. I have a lot of connections in the crypto world. They hate my guts, but but I get to see the insanity that they say. And this morning there was a guy who is the founder of a major name in this industry showing himself. I think he might have hit himself in the nuts right before he did the picture so that he could look teary-eyed. And it was, I wasn't crying about all the problems that have come out of this hack. I was crying about how wonderful my community was to come in together and support us through this terrible time. I'm sorry, no. If you're going to put yourself into a position of a profession, you have a professional's obligation to discharge your duties to the betterment of your client. And fundamentally, that means you don't give them tools that are so obviously, completely, and utterly hacked from top to bottom. You give them tools that they should expect from an institution who are supposed to be in a position of trust. Can we please stop this nonsense where people pretend that the community is so wonderful, we're all on this frontier together? If this is money, which they're all saying, Ethereum, ETH, go to the moon, Bitcoin, go to the moon, all to the moon. In fiat, of course, none of it's self-referential.
Right.
But they keep saying these things, and at the same time, you've got this utterly ridiculous idea that the community will come together so that one person can profiteer from everybody else who accept a lesser standard of professional service, platform, everything than you would expect in any other walk of life.
That is so pathological, like devouring mother complex, to be burning your customers. So you burn your customers, right? and then you show up, so you don't get blamed for it. You want to be endearing. You want to be endeared to them. So you show up acting all emotional and teary-eyed, and I'm so glad the community came together. But that's the same pattern that you get from a chronic abuser who like
No, but
throws acid on.
Well,
She throws acid on her rival where she can't see, and then shows up and says, "Oh, I need to help you. Oh my goodness."
Yeah, look, here's the thing. I saw multiple posts like this. This isn't one. This is multiple posts where people
That is
who are
psychopathic.
founders of well, what is it when you've profiteered by selling somebody a number go up tokenomics? You personally drive around in supercars, live in castles, throw big parties.
Literally.
You know, they do, quite literally. I mean, we're not just talking about the one that we all know. There's a bunch of them I know who literally live in small castles around Switzerland. And they have taken money from people who thought that there was something real happening here. And they've taken that out, extracted it into a stable coin to bank transfer. Ta-da! I've now taken the ultimate rug pull of saying, hey, those dollars, they're terrible. Allow me to give you my shiny, amazing tokenomics number will go up token. I'll take your dirty, disgusting dollars off you and give you this token, and then turn that into real assets. So it's a bit like the conversation I had with someone from the emerging economy the other day who wanted to solve a problem about how they reduce the amount of corruption that stops them from being able to export, import, and run a business properly in this country. And when I explained the answer, they said, but that means that the local currency will go to zero. I said, dead right. And it should and it must, because actually all it's doing, as you've proving, is taxing everybody. It's destroying everybody's ability to get ahead. We need to move away from the era of saying that we can trust anybody with the mint. The mint is, and I know Tolkien fans will tell me that I'm wrong, but I keep thinking that when Tolkien was writing about the One Ring to rule them all, he was talking about the mint capacity in society. If you control the mint, you basically control everything else. You can devalue everybody else. And no matter how good you are to begin with, it will corrupt you.
It's not, it's a context shift, but that's a really good metaphor, actually.
Now, I will have to confess, I think that technically, I believe I live in a castle. We rent a wing at it's essentially a mansion, but I think in technical terms, it is registered as it is a castle.
It's like a
I mean,
stronghold.
I don't exactly know the details in that, but it's so just saying.
Gosh darn castle dwellers.
And also, I wouldn't mind upgrading to a real castle of my own eventually, as long as we've actually delivered substance to justify the
I think
so
that's the point, Ulf, is that, you know, when Craig is saying that that's psychopathic, I'm saying the whole journey is psychopathic.
Yeah.
They have they've taken people's hope, they've taken people's good intentions. Most of the people who came into crypto didn't come into crypto to rip somebody else off. They came in because they could see the problems that, particularly post-global financial crisis, that's when I think a lot of the believers got involved in Bitcoin, and then you saw Bitcoin Cash, Litecoin, Doge, Ethereum, and the original starting points were actually pretty benevolent. I think what happened since the turning, as I say, crypto is not cryptocurrency and it is not blockchain. It is the bastard, cancerous, syphilitic love child of both, whose object is to defraud people of money. And the whole industry is really psychopathic. There's all this kumbaya, let's be friends, let's do this. Meantime, certain actors are profiting wildly off everybody else whilst delivering what in any other walk of life would be a substandard, unprofessional service. Why? Because if the basic tools also of delivery are this bad, I mean, this would be like BMW selling you a car that just randomly would accelerate you into a wall. That's who would buy a BMW again?
And then endear yourself to your fans by doing this
Saying,
emotional stuff. It's like SBF level psychopathy that's
well, that's what he
happening.
did. But this industry seems to have attracted an awful lot of these kind of sociopaths. And I think they see crypto as a tool to essentially tax everybody else's kindness, everybody else's goodwill. And ultimately, I believe a lot of what we've seen in this world has come from people understanding that the existing system has absolutely screwed them. Their lives have been devalued by money printing. Their economic activity is taxed by rent-seeking intermediaries who control a fractured universe of disconnected infrastructure. And I think people fundamentally get that. And they thought that some of the stuff that the crypto bros come out with democratize this and democratize that and all of it, it's all absolute nonsense. And
I think maybe we can, it might be good to frame the reason why we're so incredulous about regarding this mentality. I mean, you guys are both from a special forces background, essentially, and I've spent practically all of my professional life working on mission critical systems. And I've always felt that it gets real when you're in an environment or you're solving problems where if your stuff doesn't work, people can die. And of course, if you're trying to build an economic system that people are expected to trust their livelihood on, then it gets real enough. But essentially, that if the whole thing about the community feeling sorry for you as a developer or whatever, if your stuff doesn't work and people lose their pensions or whatever, if I make mistakes like that and it's my software that gets hacked, and I don't expect people to come and pat me on the back and say, "Oh, poor you, who caused this."
I'm the real
look,
if they
I
get
think,
really pissed and they want to lynch me, I would prefer if they don't, but I will understand the sentiment.
I think that another big aspect of why we care about this is all of us come from working families, by which I mean none of us are the sons of landed gentry who went to Eton and have trust funds that would set us up for life. We've all come from families who went to work, mothers and fathers, and we are all part of our own families. None of our children are entitled to have this idea that the world is just going to magic money into their account. We're very grounded people. And I think to a large extent, when we're trying to look at these problems, we're not talking about those people over there. We're talking about our people. When we think about getting companies to use this, when we think about getting shops to use this, people using it in their community, that we actually start to have Gajus as a real currency. I certainly am not thinking about Amazon. I'm thinking about the little farm town that my mother came from, where I partly grew up with my grandparents there. I'm thinking about the good, hardworking people who didn't have a lot but were always kind. You know, I told my children about the high trust environment that we used to have, that I grew up in, which is that when you called to someone else's house, you didn't knock on the front door, you walked around the back door, you opened the kitchen, you put the kettle on, and you asked who else wanted tea. That's the world I want to restore, and that's a huge amount of my motivation around this. And to be clear, I'm really not thinking about the people who already have everything. I'm thinking about the people who come from where I come from, who don't have much at all, and to give them something that's real and that is meaningful and that can actually deliver their economic emancipation. And that economic emancipation sits at the very bedrock of your entire sovereignty, because until you own your money, everything else is secondary. Doesn't matter how many guns you have, what freedom of speech you have. if you don't own your money, and you don't, try and transfer some money from your account to somebody else's that you haven't transacted with before, and find out how quickly your bank tell you you're not allowed to do that.
That's a shocker.
It's not your money, it's money that you have the permission of the bank and the financial system that you live within to use. That is not the same thing. And as I say, we're not the heretics. We're not trying to pull down the moneylenders' tables in the temple. Well, maybe a little bit, but we're not saying that there is
A
no
few of those need
future.
to be kicked, but yeah.
Yeah, we're not saying that there's no future to banking. Quite the opposite. We're of the opinion that, in fact, we talked about trust markets, and in that discussion, we said that actually local banks are fundamental to creating global trust markets.
100%.
What we do want to see is, we want to see blockchain do what it was supposed to do in the first place, which is give us all an open, free resource that we can operate within, in which we can establish our lives, that what we do, the work we do, isn't taxed by third-party intermediaries for no better reason that the system says so. That actually, the objection I have with many of these people who are putting up these posts on LinkedIn yesterday was, well, you're meant to be protecting them from this. You're meant to be adding value. If you add value, guess what? That's valuable. People will pay for that. One of the future aspects we see in banking is a lot of people won't actually want to have total responsibility for everything they have. So banks will become what they used to be, custodians. There's a lot of things like that at the heart of it, everybody in this team is really thinking about the people that we are from, the people around us. They're the ones that we want to see given a chance, and we want to see a fresh start for. And when we build things for the people we love, the communities that we come from, we do that with pride. That's why we put our faces in front of it. That's why we put our names in front of it. I get very angry when people, not very angry, I get angry a lot, but something that irritates me is when people talk about being a professional, and I say, okay, so when you sign something, are you liable for what you've done? And if the answer is no, then you're not a professional. We are, in this company, professionals. Our names are on everything. Our faces are on these videos. We take great pride in doing what we do and doing it well. And with that,
Our first, just to that point, like our first use case adopter that wants to test out GajuPay at the local, like it's in my village. There's a shop 300 meters from here where a little old lady and her brother still run a corner shop that's been in the family for eons. How dare I give them some garbage that can get cracked easy, that we just has known security? No, no. Also, I would get like literally lynched because I'm the one dude that looks like this living in my town. It's a pretty easy target. It's I these people that are doing the supercars and they're living in their castle, they don't know their users. It's just crazy. Anyway, it's crazy the direction things have gone, and I really hope we can get back to just doing normal business. We just got to fix money.
Yeah.
like the basic stuff, man. Let's buy some lettuce.
With that, thank you for joining us. I hope this conversation has been illuminating for you. At the very, very least, I hope it gives you the tools to question more of the environment that you work within, and understand that when we move to an internet of economics, we're not doing it lightly. We're not pushing an agenda that is just to throw some garbage together and stick it in front of you. This entire thing has been done with that integrity, with that belief in mind, that this is about creating a new global economy, an open global economy for the whole world to use, with a singular mint that you do not have to trust, that cannot deflate your work. And as I say, delivering that internet of economics. With that, thank you. Good day.